And so let's look at how Nehemiah prays. He first addresses the Lord. He says, "You're the Lord God of heaven, Yahweh Elohim Hashemayim." I just wanted to say that. I didn't take Hebrew and learn those hard words for nothing. It kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? You say, well, that's a fancy way to pray. Not really. In Persia, that's just normal way to address the Lord. "O Lord God of heaven." You're the God of the heavens. You're not just here on earth. You're above it. You're bigger than all of this. You're the great and awesome God. And so he doesn't just address him as the Lord God of heaven, but he uses adjectives which remind him of the power and the majesty and the magnificence and the ability of the Lord God. What Nehemiah is doing is he's reminding himself, my challenges may be big, the mountains may be large, but my God's bigger. That's what he's doing. He's reminding himself of the ability of God. And he doesn't just remind himself of God's power, he also reminds himself of God's faithfulness. He says, "You're a covenant-keeping God, one who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments." For those of you who don't have a Bible background, the word covenant, maybe you just roll past that, but that's a special word in the Bible. Talk about the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's really the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. What's a covenant? Best way to think about a covenant is probably in contrast to a contract. When you have a contract, two people make an agreement, and if one person fails to carry it and fails to live up to the obligations of the contract, then the contract is dissolved. You can sue their pants off, and usually the relationship is destroyed, right? But that's not a covenant. In fact, a covenant is much different. When you get married, you probably entered into a marriage covenant, not a marriage contract. Although I think in London they are now offering marriage contracts that expire after so many years. But that's a different sermon for a different day. But you have a marriage covenant. And what a marriage covenant is even if I fail to live up to my vows, even if I drop the ball, the relationship isn't destroyed because the relationship wasn't based on the obligations. The relationship was based on the covenantal commitment. It was based on the love. And so when Nehemiah calls God a covenant-keeping God, he's saying, you're the kind of God who, even though we rebelled against you, even though we sinned, you made good on your promise. You are a God who keeps his promise. So if you're going to ask Nehemiah, what is it that you believe about God? Nehemiah would say, I believe God has great power. I believe that God can do anything that is possible. And I believe that God always keeps his promises. Always. He never breaks a promise. And you say, how do you know that? You know that because of the way that Nehemiah prays. He says things like, he hears me. God's attentive to my prayer. God is vocal. He's spoken in the past. God is faithful. He always keeps his promises. He's sovereign. He's the God of heaven. He's mighty. He's great and awesome. He's holy. He's loving. He's all of these things. He will act on behalf of his people. And so Nehemiah is not praying to the kind of God who has his hands tied behind his back and is kind of fretting and hoping that humankind kind of gets their act together. This is a God who acts in history, who is powerful, and who is not indifferent to the plight of his people. That's the kind of God that Nehemiah prays to.